Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Good morning. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Good morning, Dana. I am super excited about our guest today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited too.
Good. Hey, today we have been kicking off a series of what we believe is the most important two topics anyone can learn from COVID. One is how to improve your health and how to improve your wealth. And the beautiful thing about our guest today is I think he is a master at both. So welcome, David Osborn.
Linda, it's great to be with you. I'm excited to talk with you and Dana today.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, David, why don't you, for the audience that doesn't know you, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, Cliff Note version, bring us to today and kind of tell us about you.
Well, son of a soldier, son of a real estate agent, chose the real estate agent path, thankfully, although I admire everyone that serves and I slightly regret never serving. My mom was Gary Keller's fifth agent. I got into real estate with her early at Keller Williams. Gary Keller's now a billionaire, as you all know, or may not know, but most people know. And I work at Keller Williams for the last 26 years. Started off in sales. Together we became the top team in Keller Williams, but there was only maybe 1,000 people in the company then, me and my mom. And then I went up to North Texas, New Mexico and started opening franchises at age 27. Wasn't very good at it, but I had great partners like Linda McKissick and Althea Osborn. Ended up stumbling my way to becoming the largest franchise owner in the country, mainly because my job was selling franchises, but I wasn't very good at it, but I was good at getting agents excited about joining the company. So I ended up opening the franchises myself because I couldn't get anyone to take the bait and bite and be the OP. Over time, like you do in life, I got better at running the market centers, better at selling them, better at being an OP. And eventually today with my great partner, Smokey Garrett in North Texas, New Mexico, and Memphis, we have a franchise organization that sells about $12 billion a year in real estate, 35,000 homes. And then on the side, I've also been a big time real estate investor. As you know, following you again, Linda and Jimmy, I have 101 single family homes. I have a fund that has 400 homes. I have 800 doors in apartments. I have multifamily. I have industrial. I have I have everything in real estate. I've done everything. And then I've settled on the ones I like the most. Additionally, I'm a father of 3 wonderful children and the husband of an amazing wife that puts up with me.
I love it, David. And, you know, someone can listen to that and go, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. That's way more than I could ever do. But what I love about our journey together is we both knew each other when we didn't have any of this stuff.
That's right. That's right.
And we didn't know what we were doing and we had no clue. And we had no idea we would become these people that had all of these amazing assets and wealth and stuff like that. So if you could kind of go back and say, you know, when did the light bulb go off for you about wealth? Because I think a lot of people are going to come through COVID, David, and they're going to go, man, I need to be in a different position should anything like this ever happen again with my wealth and my health. So when did that light bulb kind of go off for you? And then did you make a plan?
Well, first off, you said something, you took the words almost right out of my mouth. Certainly you took the thought out of my head, which is that, you know, sometimes I forget how far I've come, what it was like back at the beginning, but you knew me then. So you knew what a greenhorn punk, wet behind the ears kind of kid I was. I mean, I didn't know nothing from nothing, right? So I knew very little. I was a C student all the way through high school. I barely got out of college in 5.5 years. So, you know, and I talk to young people and sometimes I'm coaching and mentoring them and I forget how clueless and lost I was in my late 20s. And I meet kids today that are 25 that are way ahead of where I was, right? I talked to a kid the other day who's 31. He's a pharmacy guy and he's already got 44 homes and he makes $120,000 being a pharmacy tech, but he has another $100,000 from his homes that he owns. And I'm like, you're 31? Oh my gosh, you're so advanced and so thoughtful already. So, but I would say this, I grew up as the poor offshoot of a wealthy family. What I mean by that is, well, my dad's family wasn't wealthy at all. We were a bunch of soldiers, but on my mom's side, my granny was poor, but her brother was rich, Uncle Ted. We called him Great Uncle Ted. I guess he was technically my great uncle. So he was my mom's uncle. So I grew up around wealth without having wealth, which I think was actually helpful because it kind of gave me an ingrained psychology of wealth. And then I went to work, you know, even though I was a bad student, I worked construction as a kid. I had a lawn mowing company. So at some point I equated wealth with freedom. So when did the light go on? I don't know. But early on, I kind of thought like, if I have money, I get to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. And that that small kernel, that small seed of an idea just grew through my whole life. But what really, where the light went on for me, Linda, would be like learning. So I was a terrible student in high school and college, and then I got into business and I got into sales, and Gary Keller was one of my first mentors. And what happened then is I realized, if I learn how to sell better, I'm better at sales and I make more money. If I learn how to run my businesses better, they make more profit and I'm more successful as a business person. If I learn how to hire better, I can hire people that can run my business and we all do better. So I think the big light switch for me was not taking learning seriously. Like I had that, you hear it from high school kids sometimes, like, all the stuff they're teaching me, I'm never going to use it anyway, which is true, right? Like who I don't use calculus on a daily basis. I don't remember the names of all the presidents. I don't even remember the capitals of all the states. None of that serves me. But what you realize as an adult is they're teaching you how to learn. And then, so that light bulb that went on for me was probably in my late 20s when I realized, man, if I learn the right script, the client will view me with greater respect. If I learn how to manage my budget better, my business will make more profit. And so that's where, once that learning light bulb went on, and now it's a snowball. And to this day, I'm 53. I have almost everything a person could want in life. And I'm still reading 40 books a year and listening to 50 podcasts a year. And I track it to make sure I do it, and working on my health and my fitness. And it's just this year alone, I've added meditation in a very powerful way to my life, and it's been wonderful. And last year I added intermittent fasting to my life. So once you become addicted to learning and then you develop a certain amount of accountability around that, you can layer in all these cool new nuances that improve your life. And that's a journey in and of itself that's massively rewarding. So that would be the light bulb that went on, was the learning light bulb.
David,
Awesome.
before you got on, Linda and I were talking about every person we talked to has said that meditation has changed their life. And we're like, okay, we got to make ourselves just do it.
Dana, I've tried it on and off for years and always failed. And recently I read the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by, I can't remember his name right now. And he has coaches. So I loved the class. I also read Conscious Loving, which is a relationship version of the book, but written by a different author. And I hired a coach from the Conscious Leadership for $1,000 an hour.
Good
So,
Lord.
so very expensive. And she said to me, you'll get the most out of this coaching if you meditate at the same time. And there's always that old analogy, like if you pay for something, you value it more.
Yep.
And as soon as she told me that, I'm like, done. And I've meditated, I'm obsessive about tracking stuff. So I can actually tell you exactly that I meditated 23 times last month. So that's, almost just a little over 5 days a week. And I crave it. This morning I meditated in bed to help me try to go back to sleep. So I guess technically that counts. But I have this other meditation called Waking Up with Sam Harris. I also have the Calm meditation. Nowadays, sometimes I'm meditating twice a day for 10 minutes at a time. And I crave it. Like, to me now, I really get it. And the value I've seen of it, and I started it probably 45 days ago. So I probably did 15 days in July. But the value I see of it is when you meditate and you get good at it, you see these thoughts pop up all the time, and they can get really filled with emotion very quickly. And the value of meditation is seeing that thought is so random, because if you let it go, it goes away and some other thought pops up. So what it's helped me with, Dana, is like conflict-based thoughts that you sometimes grab a hold of me and really twist me. And I'm like thinking how to defeat this imaginary conflict that hasn't even happened yet. Now that I can recognize it as this, like, just this little like air bubble coming out of the bottom of the ocean or something, I'm doing a much better job of letting things pass through me instead of holding on to them. And it's making me happier because of it. So that's the benefit I've found so far from meditation. Some days it's easier, some days it's harder. But when I started, man, I called it commercial interruptions. In a 10-minute period, I'd probably have 60 commercial interruptions, which is my brain doing something. And now I'm probably down to like 20. Like, I'm still 20 times in that 10-minute window. I'm like, hey, what do I have to do something today? And then I'm like, oh, there's another thought. And I just let it go. And then about a minute goes by, or half a minute, and something else pops in. But I'm getting much better at letting them go. And it's making me feel more peaceful in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Adam and I were sitting in a sauna, a new place that opened up here last night, and he was meditating and I was on my phone. And I'm like, he said, you should just try it. I'm like, okay. So I put my phone down, and I bet same thing. All I could think of was just a million things running through my brain. I'm like, I need a guided meditation.
Yeah, I'm for sure still into the guided meditations, but I do see, I think as you get into mastery, maybe you just do it with ocean waves or something, or nothing. I don't know. It's still, I like the guided. I like the guy occasionally popping in and saying, if you just had a thought, I'm like, how did you know? It's okay. Just let it go. Look at the thought. Is the thought you, or is there some source behind the thought? That's helpful too. I'm like, well, is the thought me? I'm like, no, there's also something behind the thought, which is interesting. So I think it's just tuning you into something that's inside of you, every one of us, that we probably don't pay that much attention to.
No, we would lose it. It would be lost and gone without any thought to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Wow. Love it. So yeah, you're right, Dana. That keeps coming to us. So we're gonna have to work on that one. maybe we'll report on our progress.
Yeah.
So
Well, here's another little secret. I hop in the hot tub every morning. So I do my meditation in the hot tub. I don't think technically that's where you're supposed to do it, but it also means I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm relaxing, and I'm also
Efficient.
Yeah.
loosening up my body before I hit the Peloton.
yeah, well, I do the infrared sauna every day that I'm back in Texas, and I always think that would be a great place to do it. But then I also think, well, I could be catching up on a podcast or
Yeah.
in
No,
front
I
of
get
my
that.
red light. I could be doing, I like to multitask. I'm sitting on the power plate, shaking at the same time in front of a Juve red light, listening to a podcast, when really those are probably the opportune moments.
I think the sauna is where I'm going to do it as well. I'm looking forward to meditating in the sauna.
Yeah.
It's cool that my wife likes it too, so I'll do it on speaker. She's not driven like I am, but she'll do it with me and doesn't resist it. So that's kind of cool too. We'll do
Well,
it.
I think, Linda, what you just said, though, is so true, because there's always another podcast to listen to, another book to read, another YouTube video. I mean, it's constant all the time. And I'm the same way. Instead of meditating, I'm wanting to read this new book or listen to this new podcast or learn this or learn that. But sometimes our brain just needs that break.
It's helped me a lot. It's helped me a lot, guys, Linda, especially with like the conflict stuff. Cause you deal with a lot of conflict in business. Well, sometimes conflicts come up, and in the past I would really be like a pit bull chewing on a bone and not be able to let that go and trying to figure out all the permutations of what possibly could happen. And it doesn't really change anything, because you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. So what I find with meditation is I've done a much better job of letting these things that used to really grab me kind of flow past, if that makes any sense, which is good for me.
Well, it probably keeps you from having so much stress, and stress is one of the biggest culprits of bad health and stuff like that.
Correct.
So
Too much stress. A little stress is okay, but too much stress.
I want to come back to health, because I know you've been a big, master of mastering your health also. But let's go back a little bit and because a lot of this stuff, I mean, even my own, when I think about 100 houses and all those things, it's overwhelming for people. But tell us what your very first opportunity was to start building wealth. And talk a little bit around that. Was that the market centers or the region, or what was your first?
Well, the very first acquisition was my single family rental in Austin, Texas. So I bought a house. I was showing a client, my sister, you know how your first clients are usually friends and family. So I was showing my sister homes. It was a $77,000 home in Austin, Texas. And I said, hey, do you want to buy this? And she said, no. And I said, cool, because I am. And I walked out of that day and put down 20 grand and bought my first house for 77,000. That was in 1995. That's all I had was 20 grand. I'd saved up 20. And that house, after living in it 2 years with two roommates, so my rent was only $200 a month, I remember. And I always used to think I was winning because I had the master bedroom for $200 a month and my two roommates were paying $350 a month to be my roommates.
Smaller rooms.
Smaller rooms, yes. The world's changed. But anyway, so after 2 years, I was tired of mowing the yard. So I went back to an apartment and just turned it into a rental. Then I moved to Dallas and started doing market centers. So my second thing was market centers. And I've always been mad at myself, Linda, that I didn't buy a house a year. Like if I were listening, and I know guys that retired. One guy was an engineer, retired with 12 homes fully paid off, and they were bringing in like 150,000 a year, and he was netting sort of like 75, 80,000 a year after all expenses and repairs. And I remember that analogy, and that's very reachable for anyone listening to this call. One house. I always say to people, buy one every other year. But that first one that I bought, I also refinanced it in 2001. I took out 60 grand and bought 3 more houses in Lubbock. And I have all 4 of those to this day. And those 4 houses, actually I might've sold one, but like just recently I had all 4 of them, and all 4 of them were worth $600,000 and cash flowing 4,000 gross, 2,800 net. It's about 32,000 a year approximately, all on the $20,000 investment. So I never took any money out of that. I put them all on 15-year notes and I let them get paid off. And that's an example of what in 20 years is possible. 600 grand in equity, 32,000 a year passive income, and all on 20 grand over 20 plus years.
You know, and I've always, and I've said this on this podcast before, there's two kinds of entrepreneurs. There's the entrepreneur that gets to a certain number and that's more than they ever thought they'd make. And they're happy with that number, and that, you know, their goal is just to get to that number. And I think the beautiful thing about building wealth is you can do it just like the gentleman, the engineer you just said, buy so many houses, get to that number, and you're perfectly fine. And then there are those of us like myself, probably Dana and you, and that really it's more about the achievement. Who can we become through the achievement? And that's where those portfolios and all that wealth stuff gets so big, because it's not attached to a number. It's attached to, I love to learn and grow and see who I can become and what all I can achieve. Right.
The journey becomes the most rewarding part, right? So we do it, maybe we do it because we're scared and we want to be rich so we don't have to deal with fear or people controlling us. But at the end of the day, who you become on the journey to wealth is actually the most intriguing and interesting thing. I agree with you. And I think owning businesses does that way better than owning real estate. Right. But if you want a safe, steady way to wealth, it's real estate. Just, you know, have a goal of having 10 paid for houses and you'll be 5 times wealthier than any Social Security recipient would ever be. But if you want the journey of self-discovery, then owning businesses is that for sure.
Yeah. So why would you, what advice would you give anybody who's listening, having gone through COVID? Why would you explain to them why building wealth is super important, you know, and should be one of the main lessons that people get through COVID? You know, you and I have had crashes before. We've had economic downturns. Those were kind of our wake-up calls to some degree. But to a lot of people, this will be their first wake-up call. I've probably gotten more people reach out to me and say, hey, look, I'm a hairdresser, I'm a trainer, I'm a this, and I got to build wealth. I mean, I can't be in this kind of vulnerability anymore. What would you say to people that are listening on really probably one of the biggest lessons you should, besides your health, should be wealth? What would you tell them that?
You know, I mean, you should cut my hair, because my hairdresser has 4 houses, and sometimes he gives me a free haircut because I give him free advice all the time. But my hairdresser, he inherited 2 when his mom died, but he had 2 houses before that, and now he has 4, 3 in Austin and 1 in Las Cruces. And he's financially free. And with COVID hitting, his hairdressing went to zip, but his, you know, passive income was still a few thousand a month from his real estate. So, you know, if you look at the way this country is structured, building wealth isn't that hard. I mean, it's not easy. I'm not implying it's easy, but it just requires a certain amount of conscious thought and effort. And the reason you should create wealth is so you're financially freed, so that the downturns don't affect you, so that you're not beholden to anyone, and you don't have to have any fear around, you know, where the next paycheck's coming from. And the great thing about what most people miss, I think, Linda, is that if you just work on your job, you create one source of income, and you're completely vulnerable to a change in that one source of income. So so many things have changed, right? If you're a flight attendant, if you're a Orange Theory fitness manager, if you're a gym, you know, a personal trainer at a gym, all these businesses just got crushed from nowhere. But if in that time you took some of your money and just bought a couple rental properties or a couple passive income flowing opportunities, there's still pain, but the pain isn't nearly as great. So why wouldn't you? I mean, I think the question isn't why would you build wealth? It's why wouldn't you? We live in a country where it's very possible. You know, I'm in a group with 270 millionaires, and they're all everyday Joes. Nobody's exceptionally more gifted than anybody else. They're just people that have taken the time to put a little bit of effort into building passive income. And you can take that as big or as little as you want. You and I have built pretty big, Linda, but you could just build to $5,000 a month passive income, and you're better off than 99% or 95% of the world's population. So it's doable. So why wouldn't you? And then the second thing is the journey of doing that makes you a better, stronger, more capable human being, and which is also useful in life and fun in life. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So why do you think most people don't?
You know, I think fear is probably one of the biggest reasons. Apathy is the a second reason. And then, procrastination is probably the third. I don't meet many people, and I don't know if you do, that are like, oh, I don't care if I have any money. Certainly people in their early 20s sometimes say that because they're dumb, like I was. But when you're in your 30s, you're like, oh, no, you begin to realize, yeah, money's important. I need to have a certain amount of it. And I think it's more fear. Fear is probably the number one. Apathy or procrastination. And I guess those two are similar. And I think the best solution to that is to get around people that are doing it. I mean, I think one of my most greatest gifts has been being around a Tim Road, being around you guys, being around Pat Hyben, and no disrespect to any of y'all, but my general sense is And people be around me would say the same thing. Man, if David Osborn could do it, anybody can do it, right? Like, you realize there's no secret ingredient. You don't have some Harvard degree, and Pat Hyben doesn't, have some unique talent that nobody else has. He just paid attention to it, put time on it, took some capital, invested, read the books, took the seminars, and boom, it becomes this virtuous circle that sort of builds over time, and you get more and more successful, and it becomes more and more fun. It's harder at first, for sure, but it becomes fun and easy. I mean, the analogy I always give people is like, there's this river, and the river is running pretty fast, and it's cold, and it has leeches in it, and the rocks are a little slippery, but it's not deep. It only comes up to your chest. And everyone says, we're here on this side, and there's no crops and no real fruit. There's some, but it's pretty barren. But on that other side, there's a lot of crops. And you can see people over there eating and enjoying life and having apples. And you're like, just go across that river. And everybody's like, oh, I'm scared. That river's treacherous. And then somebody tries it, and yeah, it's a little slippery, and you twist an ankle maybe, and you fall in the water, you get a little wet, you're cold, but then you get to the other side, and sure enough, there's crops, and you're like, oh, check out this apple, and it's always sunny over here. And you're like looking back at the other people, because I don't find people are greedy and want to stop people from being wealthy. People in real estate are generally very generous. They want to help everybody. And you're like, no, come over. It's really good. It's not that bad. But when you're on the other side, looking at that fast-flowing, cold-looking river, which is the risk of stepping out and buying your first property and dealing with tenants and all that stuff, people are like, no, that's too scary. But it really isn't that scary. And once you get across, you're like, wow, that really wasn't that big a deal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, love it. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Okay, couple questions, a couple easy ones, and then I have one other one. You mentioned books. A lot of our listeners want to know what books people read. Are there any top? And I'd love for you to talk about Wealth Can't Wait.
Yeah, I mean, Think and Grow Rich and As a Man Thinketh are two of my favorite books. And people are always like, oh, that mindset thing. You're going to talk about mindset. People, what do I have to do to be wealthy? I don't want to talk about mindset. But the reality is, if you don't have your mindset right, you won't make any money anyway. I mean, the football players, movie stars, you see this all the time. They get $50 million and then they're broke, right? Or what Johnny Depp recently, like $600 million and he's broke. And that's because he didn't have the mind right. And if your mind's not right, doesn't matter how much money they give you, you'll blow it. And if your mind is right, you can start with you can be that janitor that donated $8 million to his alma mater when he died because he had the right mindset. So those two books are to deal with mindset and getting your head straight. But there's a million good books out there. Wealth Can't Wait, I'm really proud of. I wanted to write a book when my dad was dying of cancer. It took me 7 years to write. It probably should have been 5 books, but it's packed with value. And if your readers read it, I got an email from a guy the other day, said this book's better than Cash Flow Quadrant and better than something else. I can't remember what. I don't agree with him. I love Cash Flow Quadrant. That's another book everyone should read. But it is a great book, and I'm very proud of it. And then the second book I wrote was Miracle Morning for Millionaires, which is more of a get started book. Tribe of Millionaires is the third book, and we just wrote Bidding to Buy, which is our auction book. So yeah, Wealth Can't Wait is my favorite though.
Yeah, I love that book. You've spoken to our agents in the region about that, and it's always been very impactful. Okay, David, I'd love for you to just kind of touch on GoBundance, but also with a question. So knowing this is about wealth building, how has surrounding yourself with 200 plus other millionaires continued to help you grow and build your wealth? And then talk a little bit about GoBundance too.
Yeah, sure. So GoBundance, which is Tribe of Millionaires. In fact, if you go to tribeofmillionaires.com, you can get the book for free. But I'd really rather talk about Linda McKissick and Jimmy McKissick and being around them and being around Gary Keller at a young age and Mo Anderson and Mark Willis. And the phenomenal, if you want the fastest acceleration of your life, be around people that are living a big life. Because all the theories are great and all their ideas. Like I know a guy that's really bright, and he said, I was hanging out with him a couple years ago. He said 10 years ago, which would have been like the perfect time, or maybe 8 years ago, I bought all these books, Cash Flow Quadrant, all this, and I read them all, but I just couldn't figure out how to get the best deal. So I took no action. So this is like 2010, 2011. I'm like, Tommy, oh my Lord, if you'd have just bought one house, your net worth would be double. And he just got paralysis by analysis. He's a very bright guy, maybe too bright. But if you're around people that are actually doing it, it becomes so much easier. So who you hang out with matters so much. And if I hadn't ridden around shadowing Jimmy and Linda, or, on listing or going with Jimmy and looking at all the houses before he went to auction, or hanging out with Pat Hyben and seeing him buy these properties in the student areas and getting his cash flow, or Tim Rode, who's barely finished high school and he's living in the woods, like making 20 grand a month, not working anymore, who was a great realtor in the 80s. and you just get exposed to these people. I think that's where it gets easy. You're like, yeah, theoretically I could run a business, or theoretically I could own a bunch of rental property. That's all theory, and that's from the books, which is amazing, and you should get that basis. But then you see somebody, you're like, oh, Jimmy and Linda have 200 single family homes, or this pharmacy tech has 40 homes and he only has ever made 120 grand a year. And you start going, oh, they can do it. Why can't I do it? So who you hang around with matters so much. So Pat and I met in 97. Tim joined us in 04, and we became this accountability pod, and we would hold each other accountable in all areas of our lives: physical health, relationships, contribution to others, bucket list adventures. And we started adding in bucket list adventures because originally we all went to conferences together to get more information. But then we thought, what if we just went and like climbed to Machu Picchu or climbed Kilimanjaro or something? And then we did our masterminding on the trip. How cool would that be? So we added that in. And after doing that for a bunch of years, till 2013 or so, we just kind of got bored of one another. We're like, hey, let's invite some more people. So we invited some people to go to the Tomatina, and we hiked on the Camino de Santiago for 5 days. And that was easy. And then we invited some people to my house in Steamboat, and we ended up having like a dozen people show up. And one of the guys was a Tony Robbins maestro. And he's like, you guys have something here. This should be like an organization. You should start inviting people into it. So we kind of built the structure, we built the pillars, and we went 23, 46, 100, now we're at 270 members in like 7 or 8 years. And what we find is there is a big demand for people. You become like a lone wolf when you're doing it to a certain degree. And what we've created is a community where being exceptional is normal. The members are all millionaires, but you have to be committed to those pillars, which is extreme accountability, authentic relationships, age-defying health, financial freedom, bucket list adventures, and genuine contribution. So it's been really fun. It's more of a giving back thing for me. Yeah, it's a for-profit. We didn't do it as a nonprofit, but it doesn't make a huge amount of money in my world. But it's the amount of positive feedback I get from people that are grateful that we're pouring into them and trying to give them ideas of how to advance their lives in all these different areas. And the amount of contribution I get back from people that have amazing ideas in the group. Right now, we're rolling out our 7 to 8 program, which is how to go from 7 figures to 8 figures. And it's being very well received. So it's just a great place to contribute, give back, and see up and comers. Because if everyone in America achieved a certain amount of financial freedom, we would be a different country. We'd be a different community, and we'd have different conversations because everyone would be stakeholders. And that's, that would be our dream, is that more and more people achieve, some level of financial freedom and success in this country, where the opportunities are greatest. I lived in Europe. There's no opportunities as great as the United States of America for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You guys bring so much value. I have the privilege of getting to sneak and listen some evenings when Adam's watching the guest speakers, and I'm always find myself grabbing a pen and jotting something down, because there's just, it's really great. I know it's impacted a ton of people's lives.
It's rewarding. We had Rob O'Neill on last night on a call, the guy that shot Osama bin Laden. It was really cool. And had 140 guys listening in. It was just cool, man. It's cool to be able to contribute and give back. And, some of us are more privileged than others, and we're working really hard to try to outreach to people that, didn't have as much opportunity either. And it's a fun journey. It's fun to see so much impact that we're creating in the world. But you guys are doing the same thing with your podcast. Everything we can do to help one another out, I think, in life is what becomes eventually, or what is Maxwell says, you go from struggle to success to significance, which is giving back. And I think most of us probably are at significance at this point. So it's fun.
That's funny that you just said that, because I was just getting ready to say one of the biggest things I've learned from John Maxwell is he says great leaders introduce people around them to other great leaders. And put people in the past that they may need to hear from. And so I think that that's cool. So David, do you want to switch gears real quick and talk about health for the last couple minutes? Because I know anything else you would add to that? Because I know you've kind of had a really strong health journey over the last, year or so, right?
Yeah, I've actually had it for 10 years, but the last few years have been very fruitful as well. So when my dad got cancer, he had lung cancer. That would have been 2006. He got diagnosed. He died in 2008. My daughter was born a month after he died. I was really sad. I love my dad very much, like all of us do, I guess. I mean, he was a big presence in my life. So I tried to read all these books to try to save his life. So I read books on juicing and health, and I started reading health. Like, until that moment, I hadn't really paid attention to that. I wasn't bad at working out, but I wasn't great at it. I wasn't a bad eater, but I wasn't a great eater. I certainly drank much more alcohol back then. So I read all these books. My dad was old school soldier. He said, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And he ate meat and potatoes until he died. And, but I took some of it. So that began my journey as about 10 years ago of eating more vegetables, instead of ordering fries, I started ordering a salad with my burger, eventually kind of went away from bread. And that journey has led me through to most recently, about 3 years ago, I hired a concierge doctor to work only with me. And he wanted me to drop carbs, drop sugars, and really kind of focus on slightly keto-ish diet and then intermittent fast. And so I integrated all that in my life. Today, I track the number of days I don't drink alcohol. So my wife and I used to have a glass of wine almost every night, and now I drink maybe twice a week. I've cut sugar down. I kind of let myself do whatever I want on the weekends. So I'm kind of a 5-day-a-week guy. I intermittent fast 5 days a week. And with all that, I've taken my body fat from a respectable 18% all the way down to like 9%. So, I'm sitting with you guys right now starving because I haven't eaten anything, but I've done my workout, rode my Peloton, got halfway through my yoga session, did my meditation, had a couple of calls, had a board meeting, hopping on with you guys. And then I'll get to eat in about, an hour or so.
How many hours are you fasting?
Yeah, 8. I do 11 to 7 or 12 to 8. I'm not too strict about it. I was more strict early. My doctor told me once you shift, you can actually cheat. You got to be pretty disciplined at first. And then once you physically have shifted, you can actually cheat a little bit more. Your body can process it all much better. And it seems to be true for me. So I do the 8-hour fast just 5 days a week. Like I said, on weekends, I eat pancakes with the kids and we get to have our special days and stuff like that. But it's been really good. One thing I'm struggling with that I haven't done a good job at yet is to eat more vegetarian. I'm a fan of How Not to Die by Gerber. Michael Gerber, I think his name is. We had him on with GoBundance the other day. And I think he makes a lot of sense. We eat way too much meat. So I've definitely dialed the meat back, but I haven't reached a point of, I eat meat still pretty much every day. I mean, I haven't eliminated.
Do you still have meatless Mondays? I remember that.
Yeah, I did. No, I have gone away from that, Linda. It didn't work that good for me. So there's no point. If it doesn't work, you got to think of something else. What I would say I've done is taken meat from the majority of my plate to a third of my plate, if that makes any sense. Like if they serve me 3 pieces of bacon, I might eat 1 or 1.5. Does that make sense? So, but no, I just don't feel full without the meat yet. I got to work on that. Obviously, I don't know how you feel about that, and I'll do like a salad at lunch, a big salad. But at some point in the day, if I'll crave something that's meat based.
So I'm curious because, I truly believe everybody's unique. I don't believe everybody should not do meat or just be vegetarian or do whatever. I think you're uniquely made and your genes dictate what you should and shouldn't probably have or eat. So any great books that you've read or your concierge doctor recommended that you thought would be beneficial for others to read?
Yeah, How Not to Die was great, I thought. I'm in the middle of reading Longevity, the one by David Sinclair. I can't remember what the title exactly is. And I agree with you. I don't think it matters as much as what you eat. I think the main problem we have in America is we all eat too much. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to be said for keeping your calories and I think there's something to be said for keeping your calories to the amount of energy you put out each day. And I also think there's something to be said for having a certain period where you're hungry. Because if you think back to the beginning, like most likely were we fed all the time? Most likely did the primitive man have a refrigerator that he could go to and just snack on snacks. And I think the other thing is the more live food, the better, the more living food, the more fresh food, like the produce and stuff like that, the better. I'm not 100% convinced we shouldn't eat some meat. I'm more of a blue zone diet guy. He's like, yeah, the people that live the longest do eat meat, but it's like a luxury and it's a side dish and it's not usually the majority of their plate. Like it's the opposite of what we do. We'll have the burger with a little salad. They would eat a big salad with a little bit of meat, if that makes sense. But Blue Zones was another one. The Blue Zone book was really good. And then I'm pretty sadly sure that alcohol isn't really great for you. I mean, I used to love my wine and Napa Valley's already emailed me crying because they're going broke because the amount we used to drink versus what we drink. I tried to find good arguments for why alcohol is good for you. And there's some argument that a tiny little bit a day is good for you, not even like a full glass, but, and then sugar is the other one. SOS, no sugar, salts, and oils aren't really great for you. It's really hard to cook without oil. I also went away from, I roll with my wife a little bit on that because she cooks for us. And so I'm not going to argue like, hey, it's Monday. Why did you cook this delicious fish? I'm just going to eat it because it's delicious. Right. Okay. So.
Well, you might check out a place called Dry Farms Wine. They have organic wines and seem to be a little, if you're going to have wines.
Yeah, I've heard of them actually. I think I've tried them once. I should go back to that.
The guest that we just had on, David, right before you said that he's getting ready. He read the Carnivore Code book, and he's getting ready to do 30 days of eating only meat.
Yeah, I've heard we had a big debate in GoBundance. We did the, meat eaters versus the vegetarians. And I just can't believe that cavemen walked around eating. I'm thinking more likely seeds and berries and meat was a luxury, or, when they got to kill something, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have the clear answers. I get my blood done every quarter too. And I get all my biomarkers checked. So my cholesterol, my, just really everything, my insulin, my, glucose and all the rest of it. And I kind of follow that. I follow my doctor a little bit. My doctor's not anti-meat, by the way. He just says it should be a smaller portion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So who's your concierge doctor, David?
It's Dr. Hofarth. He actually wrote a book called Functional Medicine. And it's a good book. He's very busy, very full. He also did me a little bit of hormone replacement therapy, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not sure how I know. I don't know enough about that, but my wife and I are both doing a little HRT.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So real quick, as we wrap up, what would be any last tip you'd give if someone's just starting because of COVID to think about building wealth and their health? What would be one thing you'd tell them on each?
Well, I think the number one thing that served me in life, Linda, is setting goals. I read early in my career, somebody said 95% of millionaires set goals, but only 5% of people set goals. So think about that. Like 95% of millionaires have goals and 5% of people have goals, right? So I talk New Year's resolutions that people don't follow. In fact, I never get that joke. Every year they're like, oh, people set New Year's resolutions and don't fulfill them. But I do, because I developed over 25 years a muscle and accountability around getting my goals done. And I was terrible at it at first. But I think, you've got to have an agenda for your life. And so today I'm one of the most goal-driven people I know. I have my goals right here. I don't know if everyone's on video or audio, but I have about 80 goals right there, all categorized and highlighted. I look at them almost every day. I'm constantly looking at stuff, and then I break it down to my habit trackers, which are the things that I want to track more closely. And that would include my meditation, my workouts, my Peloton, playing guitar with my daughter, doing different things, reading books, learning. And what I believe about life is that you put on little bits of improvement every day over a lifetime. And in a year, you'll be amazed at how far you've come. In 5 years, you'll be shocked at how far you've gone. And so that ability to have an agenda for your life. So I'd encourage your listeners to go sit somewhere quiet with a journal and free flow thoughts of what they want to have happen in the next 5 or 10 years, write them down, categorize them, cross out the ones that don't work, add the ones that do work, and just start becoming somebody that has an agenda for your life every day. And I think that's the other thing I've noted about massively successful people is every morning they have an agenda for their life, and it's the right agenda, not just an agenda, not just a crazy agenda. Because I do know people that are frenetically active and they have an agenda, but their agenda doesn't necessarily lead to the results they want. Their agenda might be just to work 20 hours in a day or 15 hours in a day, but they don't have an agenda around food. So they're 40 pounds overweight. They don't have an agenda about building wealth. So even though they make a lot of money, they don't have financial freedom. So you have to have the right agenda, but develop that muscle around setting goals, which is your agenda for your life, and then holding yourself accountable to hitting those goals. And that'll change everything for you. Not immediately. People overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. But if you'll stick with it, in 10 years, you'll be further than you ever thought you would be. And I don't know about you, Linda, but I think I'm further in my life than I ever thought I would be because I crossed that river. But that first year or two was the hardest part. And what helped me in that was podcasts like this, reading the right books, listening to the right tapes. Back then, of course, today it's all iPods. But then mostly being around the right people, mentors, partners, and peers.
Absolutely. Love it. So true, David.
Yeah,
so true. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. And remember, we're going to do a series we'll be continuing our series on health and wealth. And if you have questions around these two topics, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. And we'd love for you to reach down and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And the greatest compliment you can give Dana and I is if you see an episode that someone would enjoy, be sure and pass this podcast along to anyone that you might know that might enjoy it. And we'll be putting all the links down on how you can find and follow David in the show notes. So be sure and reach out, read his books. They're fabulous. There's no better person to learn from about health or wealth than David. So David, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Dana, I'll see you next week.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thanks, David.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.